Colt Mercer rode into the waning light of dusk, the silhouette of the remote ranch emerging against the fiery sky. The dusty trail had led him through an expanse of rugged hills, where the wind whispered stories of untold lives and lost souls. He was a man forged in shadows, a hired gun whose name had earned a reputation for being silent, efficient, and uncompromisingly professional. Colt had always adhered to his code: payment up front and emotional distance from his targets. In his world, feelings clouded judgment, and attachment was a luxury he could not afford. As he approached the weathered farmhouse, the air hung heavy with foreboding. Colt dismounted, his instincts honed from years of experience tingling at the nape of his neck. Stepping inside, he was met with an eerie silence that settled over the place like a thick fog. It took only a moment for his gaze to find the lifeless form of Eloise Lorne, sprawled on the floor in a pool of crimson, his mission completed without him lifting a finger. But it wasn't just another job gone sideways, it was a game he hadn't anticipated. Behind the intricate web spun by fate stood Eloise Lorne, her presence a stark contrast to the chaos that surrounded them. She stood waiting, glass of whiskey in hand, an image of grace and sorrow entwined. As Colt's eyes met hers, he saw past the grief. There was strength, resolve, and an invitation to a story that promised to unravel everything he thought he knew. "Seems you've arrived late," she said, her voice steady despite the tremors in her heart. "You were supposed to kill my husband." Her words struck Colt with the weight of revelation. This was no ordinary hit, it was layered in betrayal and deception. The truth unfurled before him like the horizon, revealing that Eloise was not merely a victim but the true target all along. Emotions stirred within him, feelings he had vowed to keep buried, challenging the walls he had erected around his heart. As the reality set in, Colt was faced with an unexpected choice. He could walk away as he always had, leaving Eloise to fend for herself against the unseen threats lurking in the West, or he could stand beside her, risking everything to protect the one woman who dared to look beyond his facade as a cold-hearted killer. The stakes had never felt higher, and for the first time in years, Colt was torn between duty and desire. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the remote ranch as Colt Mercer stepped inside the farmhouse. The heavy silence that enveloped him was palpable, a stark contrast to the rugged beauty of the landscape outside. He had anticipated the usual scene of chaos that accompanied his line of work, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The sight of Eloise Lorne's lifeless body sprawled on the floor sent a jolt through Colt, a visceral reminder of the finality of death. Colt's instincts kicked in as he scanned the room, his pulse quickening with the knowledge that he was now walking on unfamiliar ground. The job had shifted from straightforward to complicated in an instant, and the betrayal hung thick in the air like smoke. He approached Eloise cautiously, noting the position of the body and the absence of struggle. This had been a planned execution, not a desperate fight for survival. It was then that he noticed the glass of whiskey resting on the table, untouched, a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded. The realization struck him harder than he expected. Someone had orchestrated this scene, and now Colt was ensnared in a web far more intricate than he had anticipated. His mind raced with questions and possibilities, each more dangerous than the last. As Colt turned to leave the grim tableau behind him, he caught sight of Eloise Lorne standing in the doorway, her presence both haunting and magnetic. She held her glass with a steady hand, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions, grief mingled with resolve. "You're late," she said softly, her voice breaking through the heavy atmosphere. "I hoped you'd come to finish what you started." In that moment, everything shifted again. Eloise wasn't just a grieving widow, she was an active participant in this tragic play. Her words hinted at a deeper understanding of their shared fate, one that would soon intertwine their lives beyond Colt's initial intentions as a hired gun. He could see in her gaze that she had known danger long before his arrival. The air crackled with tension as Colt processed what it meant for him to be here now, at this very moment. Was he merely a pawn in someone else's game, or could he choose to rewrite his role? The stakes were higher than ever, and every instinct urged him to flee, but something held him in place, drawing him into Eloise's orbit like a moth to flame. The danger lurking outside awaited them both, but it was within these walls that the real battle would begin. Colt's heart raced as he faced Eloise Lorne, the dramatic shift from lifelessness to warm presence nearly overwhelming. She stood framed by the dim light of the farmhouse, her expression a mix of sorrow and steely resolve that intrigued him despite the circumstances. The glass of whiskey in her hand gleamed like a promise, inviting him into a world that felt alien yet oddly magnetic. As she closed the distance between them, Colt struggled to maintain his notorious composure. Eloise's quiet confidence broke through his carefully crafted walls. "You must be thirsty after your ride," she offered softly, raising the glass. "It's not often we have visitors here, especially those sent with a purpose." Her words held an undercurrent of meaning that made the air between them crackle. "Your husband," Colt began cautiously, but she interrupted with a wave of her hand. "Silas was always more than what anyone could see," she replied, a hint of bitterness curling her lips. "But he was also a fool, believing he could outrun his debts." As she took a sip from her glass, Colt noticed a tremor in her hand, revealing the turmoil beneath her composed facade. The whiskey flowed smooth as honey, but it didn't erase the dark shadows lurking in her gaze. With each word, Eloise wove a narrative of betrayal that seemed to ensnare them both. "You weren't meant to find Silas like this," she continued. "He thought he had made arrangements to protect me from what was coming. Instead, all he did was bury us deeper in danger." Her revelation hit Colt like a bullet. This wasn't merely about him completing a contract. It was about unraveling a conspiracy that spanned beyond anything he had encountered. The unexpected twist brewed an unsettling awareness within him that propelled him toward involvement rather than detachment. "This isn't just business for you anymore," she asserted as if reading his thoughts. "They're coming for me because I know too much." Colt sighed deeply, aware that guarding Eloise would require him to forsake his old ways. The very code that had kept him alive for years now felt threatened by her fiery spirit. In that moment, beneath the dim glow of the ranch house light, Colt's previous thoughts of walking away clashed violently with an impulsive urge to stay and fight. Eloise took another sip and met his gaze head-on, unyielding. "So what will it be? Will you leave me to face them alone or stand against whatever comes next?" Her challenge hung heavy in the air, binding their fates together against an unseen enemy lurking outside their fragile sanctuary. The tension in the room was thick as Colt held Eloise's gaze, her challenge lingering like smoke in the air. He could feel the gravity of the situation enveloping them both, and the weight of her revelation pressed against his chest. With a resolute breath, she stepped closer, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. "You need to understand that the hit on Silas wasn't just a random act of violence. It was a setup. I'm the one they truly want." Colt's mind reeled, struggling to absorb the enormity of her words. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eloise clenched her jaw, drawing strength from deep within. "Silas had enemies, powerful ones who believed he had something they needed. He thought he could shield me by putting a target on his back instead." Her eyes flashed with anger and sorrow, emotions battling within her like tempestuous winds. "He underestimated how far they would go to silence us both." Colt took a step back, grappling with the unexpected emotions bubbling to the surface. His instincts screamed at him to remain detached, to adhere to the code that had kept him safe all these years. Yet, as he listened to Eloise, he felt a stirring, a protective urge he hadn't allowed himself to embrace in a long time. "So they're coming for you because of him?" Colt questioned, trying to piece together the puzzle. The implications were chilling. It was no longer just about carrying out a contract. It was about saving an innocent woman ensnared in a deadly game. "Yes," she affirmed, her expression resolute, "and now I'm tied to you because of this mess." The vulnerability in Eloise's tone struck Colt harder than any bullet ever could. She wasn't just a widow grieving for her husband. She was a woman fighting for survival against forces she couldn't fully comprehend. As Colt processed the gravity of their situation, something shifted deep within him. The lines between killer and protector blurred as he wrestled with his conscience. Protecting Eloise would mean stepping into danger, an act of defiance against everything he'd ever known. "Why should I care?" Colt found himself asking, though he already knew the answer. The thought of leaving her unprotected felt unacceptable, even as inner turmoil raged within him. Eloise took a precarious step closer, her determination unyielding. "Because you're more than just a hired gun to me, you can choose to be my ally instead of my executioner." Her words cut through his defenses, laying bare the truth that had haunted him. Beneath his hardened exterior lay a man craving purpose beyond the life he had chosen. In that moment, Colt realized he stood at a crossroads. The choice before him could either seal his fate or lead him toward redemption alongside Eloise as they faced the dark landscape ahead together. Colt stood in the dim light of the farmhouse, the weight of Eloise's words pressing heavily on his chest. The air felt thick with anticipation, and he could sense that this moment would forever alter the trajectory of his life. He was a man built on the principles of detachment, a hired gun who had navigated shadows and bloodshed with cold precision. Yet here he was, faced with a choice that threatened to unravel everything he had ever known. As he looked at Eloise, standing resolute yet vulnerable, he couldn't shake the stirring emotions within him. Her bravery ignited something long dormant, a flicker of humanity he had suppressed for years. Colt's instincts screamed at him to adhere to his code, walk away before getting entangled in someone else's struggles. This wasn't the first time he had encountered danger, nor was it the first time he had walked away without looking back, but there was something about Eloise, a strength in her gaze that pulled him closer. She wasn't just another victim in a world riddled with chaos. She was a woman who had lost everything yet still stood tall, ready to fight for her life. Colt's heart wavered as he contemplated leaving her to face the darkness alone. The thought felt increasingly unacceptable, drawing him into a moral quagmire. "What have I got myself into?" Colt muttered under his breath, wrestling with conflicting desires. He envisioned the dusty trails leading away from the ranch and the freedom they promised, a return to a solitary existence far from the dangers that loomed behind him. But as he considered Eloise's plight, he felt an equally powerful pull to stay and protect her, to embrace a connection that transcended their bleak circumstances. His mind raced with possibilities. What if stepping into this battle could lead him toward redemption? What if by guiding Eloise through this nightmare he could find purpose beyond being a mere weapon for hire? The idea was intoxicating yet terrifying, and Colt knew that embracing such vulnerability could come at a steep price. Eloise watched him closely, her expression shifting from hope to uncertainty as she sensed his internal struggle. "You don't have to decide right now," she said softly, but there was an undeniable urgency in her voice. "Just know that whatever you choose will shape more than just your fate." In that moment, Colt realized he stood at a precipice. A life-altering decision lay before him: to remain haunted by his past or embrace the opportunity for redemption by protecting a woman who saw beyond his hardened exterior. The growing bond between them ignited a flicker of hope within him. Perhaps there was still a chance to redefine who he was amidst the chaos that awaited them both. With each heartbeat echoing in his ears, Colt wrestled with his instinct to flee and the rising desire to fight alongside Eloise against whatever threats lingered on the horizon. Colt's internal struggle was abruptly interrupted by the sound of gravel crunching under booted feet outside the farmhouse. The ominous noise sent a fresh wave of tension coursing through him, pulling his focus away from his tumultuous thoughts and toward the encroaching threat. He glanced at Eloise, whose expression shifted from determination to apprehension as she sensed the danger lurking just beyond their sanctuary. "They're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible but weighted with fear. The air was electric with urgency, and Colt could feel the adrenaline surging through his veins as he rushed to the window. Peering out through the grimy glass, Colt's heart sank as he spotted a trio of men approaching on horseback, their silhouettes stark against the fading light. They moved with the confidence of hunters familiar with their prey, their eyes scanned the surroundings, violent intent palpable in their posture. Colt's instincts kicked into overdrive. These were not ordinary men, they were dangerous, armed, and determined. "What do we do?" Eloise asked, her voice trembling slightly. Colt turned to her, taking in the vulnerability etched on her delicate features and the strength that had drawn him to her. There was no time for contemplation now, action was essential. "Get to the back," Colt ordered, stepping into a protective stance. "We have to find a way out before they come inside." She nodded, and the determination in her eyes returned as she moved swiftly toward the rear of the house. Following closely behind, Colt felt a sense of urgency unlike any he had experienced before. He realized that for all his years as a hired gun, he had never felt this kind of protectiveness for another person, a realization that both thrilled and terrified him. Suddenly, a loud banging reverberated through the farmhouse, echoing through the walls like a death knell. The intruders were forcing their way in, and Colt knew time was running out. He gestured for Eloise to crouch low as they made their way toward an old back door that led into a thicket of trees surrounding the property. Before they could reach it, shouts erupted outside and Colt's gut twisted at the sound. "Get ready," he whispered, preparing himself for whatever would come next. The men were closing in, voices harsh and demanding. It was a matter of moments before they would break through. For Colt, the stakes had never been higher. He realized this wasn't just about saving a woman who had seen past his exterior, it was about confronting the ghosts of his past while standing against the violence that threatened to consume them both. As the door rattled violently under the force of a booted kick, Colt took a deep breath, steeling himself for the fight ahead. The darkness that had once been all too familiar now bore a flicker of hope, a chance for redemption fueled by connection and courage. As the door shuddered under the force of repeated blows, Colt and Eloise moved swiftly, finding refuge in the shadows cast by the old oak trees surrounding the farmhouse. Adrenaline coursed through Colt's veins as they crouched low, their breaths shallow and synchronized, refracting the tension of this moment into a silent understanding. They were no longer just a hired mercenary and a frightened widow. They had become two souls united against a common enemy. What do we do? Eloise asked, her voice trembling but determined as they huddled beneath the sprawling branches. Colt could see her resolve harden in the dim light. There was a noticeable shift from vulnerability to strength as they began to form an alliance forged in necessity and urgency. "We'll wait until they come through that door," he replied, his voice steady. "Then we'll make our move." Underneath his bravado lay uncharted waters. Without a precise plan, it felt like a leap into the unknown, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this was precisely where he needed to be. With their backs against the rough bark of the tree, silence wrapped around them, broken only by the distant shouts of their pursuers. Slowly, Eloise began to share fragments of her life before this chaos, a glimpse into her past that had been marred by loss and betrayal. She told him stories of happier times with sailors, moments filled with laughter before dark shadows stalked their existence. In sharing those memories, she revealed her vulnerabilities, drawing a subtle line of camaraderie between them. "I sometimes wonder if I ever really knew him," she admitted softly, her gaze lost in the distance. "He was always so driven by his ambitions, but for me, I was just his wife, someone he wanted to protect at all costs." Colt felt an echo of familiarity in her words. He too had once poured himself into protecting others. Those memories flickered to life as he shared a few glimpses of his own chaotic background, a childhood filled with scars that shaped him into the man he was today. Being ruthless felt like survival, he confessed, too often hiding behind indifference and shadows. In that moment of shared vulnerability, an unexpected bond formed, a thread stitched together by experiences of sorrow and loss that transcended their stark realities. Colt found himself looking at Eloise not just as a target or a partner in this fight, but as someone who understood him on a fundamental level. As they listened to the growing commotion outside, something shifted within Colt. The fear coursing through him began to transform into an anchor, not just concern for Eloise's safety, but also a newfound purpose for himself. Together in this battle against those who hunted them, they were beginning to forge not only a formidable alliance, but also a profound connection that offered both hope and redemption amidst their chaos. In this unlikely partnership, Colt felt himself moving closer to something he had long thought lost: the power of human connection and reclaiming his own identity beyond being merely a hired gun. With each passing moment as their adversaries closed in, Colt prepared himself. He wouldn't walk away this time. He would stand firm and fight alongside Eloise for whatever future lay ahead. With the sun dipping below the horizon, Colt and Eloise pressed on through the wilderness, their hearts pounding in synchrony as they navigated the dense underbrush. They had spent days evading their pursuers, but exhaustion was beginning to weigh heavily on both of them. Just as Colt began to feel a flicker of hope, the tranquil moment shattered. A rustle in the bushes announced the presence of their adversaries. "Stay close," Colt murmured, instinctively positioning himself between Eloise and the sound. He gripped his weapon tighter, senses heightened as shadows moved against the dimming light. The tension was palpable as figures emerged, a group of men armed and menacingly confident. "Looks like we found our little birds," one of them taunted, a smirk playing on his lips. Colt recognized him. He had seen this man's face before, a henchman of Silas's enemies. Anger surged within Colt at the sight of his smug arrogance. Before he could react, a voice cut through the air. Eloise stepped forward defiantly. "You won't take me again," she declared, surprising both Colt and her pursuers with her sudden courage. Her stance radiated strength that belied her earlier fears. The leader chuckled darkly. "Oh, but we will. You're far too valuable to let slip away again." Colt's heart raced as he realized how much danger Eloise was truly in. "Back off," he shouted, stepping protectively toward her as if his mere presence could shield her from harm. The confrontation escalated rapidly. Words turned into shouts as Colt and Eloise fought side by side against their attackers. In those harrowing moments, adrenaline fueled them both, their shared determination transforming fear into action. As they exchanged blows and gunfire erupted around them, revelations surfaced amidst chaos. In the heat of battle, Colt caught a glimpse of Eloise's tenacity. Her fierce resolve resonated with him deeply. It reminded him of his own past battles when he fought not just for survival but for what was right. Each strike she delivered echoed stories she had shared with him about Silas, the man who had misjudged her strength and cast her aside in favor of ambition. As they finally took down two would-be captors together, breathless but victorious for now, Eloise locked eyes with Colt amidst the turmoil, a moment where unspoken truths hung heavy in the air. "I never thought I could fight like that," she admitted breathlessly. "Neither did I," Colt replied, realizing that each clash had revealed more than just their physical prowess. It had uncovered pieces of themselves they had buried deep within, their fears and desires intertwined in this newfound alliance. With every challenge they faced together, both were forced to confront not only external threats, but also their own haunting pasts that shaped who they were becoming. Allies bound by scars yet unbroken by adversity. As they prepared to flee again into the night's embrace, an indelible bond formed between them. A connection fortified by shared struggles that promised to change everything for both Colt and Eloise as they continued to navigate through uncertainty together. The night had fallen thick and heavy when Colt and Eloise reached the edge of a clearing, their refuge giving way to confrontation. The adrenaline from their earlier skirmish still coursed through their veins as they prepared for the inevitable clash with the mercenaries hunting them. Colt's instincts kicked in, his mind racing to strategize their next move. Suddenly, the sound of hoots echoed in the darkness, and the three men emerged from the shadows like phantoms, each armed and ready for a fight. Colt's grip tightened on his weapon as he stepped forward protectively. "You don't want to do this," he warned, his voice low and steady, but his heart thundered in his chest. "On the contrary," the lead mercenary sneered, adjusting his stance to indicate readiness. "We've been waiting for this moment." Eloise remained close to Colt's side, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of what was at stake. She leaned in slightly, whispering, "We have to find a way to turn this around." Colt nodded, his gaze fixed on their adversaries, but at that moment the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for Eloise's life, and for hers he would risk everything. As bullets flew and chaos erupted around them, Colt and Eloise fell into a rhythm born from their shared experience. They moved fluidly together. While Colt provided cover fire, Eloise darted between trees, her agility surprising even herself as she evaded danger. In those moments of desperation, they discovered hidden strengths, their bond deepening under pressure. In the thick of battle, a burst of gunfire forced Colt to duck behind a tree. As he caught his breath, he turned back to Eloise only to see her confronting one of the mercenaries head-on. "You won't take me," she yelled fiercely, surprising both Colt and their opponent. "Eloise," Colt shouted, panic seizing him as he rushed to her aid, but she managed to knock the man off balance, showing unexpected courage in her defensive maneuvers. This moment ignited something inside Colt, a fierce desire to protect not just her body but also her spirit. As they fought side by side against overwhelming odds, truths about sacrifice began to surface. Every movement echoed their shared vulnerabilities, trust blossomed in this maelstrom of chaos. Colt realized that he could no longer simply be a detached hired gun. He had become an integral part of something larger, an alliance forged not only from necessity but from respect and mutual understanding. In a final showdown, Colt faced down the leader of the mercenaries. The fight was brutal, filled with grunts and impacts that resonated through the clearing. In that desperate moment, Colt made a choice. He was willing to sacrifice himself if it meant saving Eloise. With one last surge of strength, he disarmed his opponent and pinned him down. As silence fell over the clearing, breathless and trembling, both Colt and Eloise stood victorious yet changed forever. The confrontation had not only tested their skills but also laid bare their souls, revealing the depth of trust they had formed in such a short time and solidifying their bond as they faced the uncertain future together. As dawn broke over the horizon, Colt and Eloise stood in the clearing where the battle had transpired, the aftermath of their confrontation weighing heavily on them. The air was tinged with the smell of gunpowder and bruised earth, a stark reminder of the violence they had just endured. Colt surveyed the quiet landscape, his heart still racing from adrenaline but slowly succumbing to the reality of what they had accomplished together. "We did it," Eloise said softly, her voice breaking through the contemplative silence. She looked at him with eyes that sparkled with both relief and unspoken gratitude. The fierce determination he'd seen in her during the fight lingered in her gaze, and Colt couldn't help but feel a warmth spread through him, an unfamiliar sensation after living so long as a solitary figure. "Yeah," he replied, his tone measured, "but it's not over yet." The threat of Silas's enemies still loomed. They hadn't completely vanquished the danger that had followed them. Yet Colt was beginning to understand that this moment marked a profound shift for both of them. In the days that followed their harrowing escape, they traveled further into the wilderness, seeking shelter while planning their next steps. Each conversation unveiled layers about their lives. Eloise shared stories of her life with Silas that painted a picture of ambition overshadowed by betrayal, while Colt recounted his journey from detached hired gun to someone who now fought for more than just money or survival. As they moved closer together during this time, each day brought new revelations about trust and sacrifice. Eloise began to see Colt not merely as a protector but as a man capable of change, while Colt discovered that vulnerability could be an act of bravery in itself. They were redefining who they were, no longer just a mercenary or a widow but partners navigating through chaos hand in hand. One evening, as they sat by a flickering campfire beneath a sky dotted with stars, Colt found himself sharing thoughts he had long suppressed. "I've always believed I was just meant to be this way," he confessed, staring into the flames. "A shadow, but being with you, I realize I want to fight for something real." Eloise reached out and grasped his hand tightly. "You're not alone anymore," she said firmly, her voice filled with conviction. "We can face whatever comes next together." Her words settled into his heart like an anchor amidst turbulent seas. The choices made in moments of chaos had forged an unbreakable bond between them, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and hope for redemption. As the sun began to rise once more on a new day, Colt felt a sense of possibility take root within him, a promise that their futures were intertwined now, shaped by what they had survived together and what lay ahead. They were not just fleeing from their pasts anymore. They were moving forward hand in hand toward an uncertain future filled with newfound purpose and perhaps even love amidst the remnants of chaos they left behind. In the aftermath of their harrowing journey, Colt sat by the campfire, watching the flames dance and flicker in the gathering twilight. The battles they had faced echoed in his mind, but more importantly, he reflected on the choices he had made, choices that had transformed him from a solitary hired gun into a protector. He had always been defined by his detachment, a man who operated in shadows, but now, standing beside Eloise, he felt the stirrings of something new and profound. Eloise joined him by the fire, her expression contemplative as she gazed into the flames. "I never imagined I'd be fighting for my life like this," she said quietly, breaking the silence that enveloped them. "But I also never imagined I'd find someone willing to stand by me." Colt turned to her, struck by the sincerity in her voice. "You're stronger than you realize," he replied. "You've faced so much and yet kept moving forward. It's inspiring." His words held weight, echoing the respect he had gained for her not just as a survivor but as a warrior in her own right. Together they had confronted threats that would have shattered lesser souls, yet each encounter had forged an unbreakable bond between them. Colt realized that protecting Eloise was not merely about keeping her safe from harm. It was about embracing a shared journey filled with trust and vulnerability. In doing so, he found himself redefining what it meant to be human, to feel deeply and risk everything for another person. As they sat together under the expansive night sky, glittering with stars, Colt began to understand that his past as a hired gun did not dictate his future. He was no longer just a weapon or an instrument of violence. He was becoming a man capable of love and connection, someone who could fight for something greater than himself. The release of burdens accumulated over years began to feel liberating. Perhaps redemption was within reach after all. "Whatever lies ahead," Colt said softly, "I want you to know I'll be here with you." His promise hung in the air like a sacred vow. Eloise smiled at him, her eyes shimmering with hope. "And I'll fight beside you," she affirmed. Together they represented survival against overwhelming odds, a testament to resilience and the power of human connection amidst chaos. As dawn approached once more on the horizon, Colt felt a newfound sense of purpose take root within him. Their lives were intertwined now by shared struggles and dreams for the future. They were not running from their pasts anymore. Instead, they were moving toward something bright and promising, a new beginning filled with endless possibilities. In that moment, surrounded by nature's beauty and each other's presence, Colt knew that this journey was only just beginning.